Welcome to Our Nation Today. I'm K.R. Davidson. Thanks for joining us as we look at the stories behind the headlines. The federal government has waded into the fight over Enbridge's Line 5 pipeline battle with Michigan. Ottawa has submitted a brief in support of Enbridge, arguing that closing the pipeline would have a massive impact on Canada, both in terms of jobs and energy security. It also argues that Governor Whitmer is violating a 1977 treaty that seems to have been designed to prevent state governments from interfering with the transit of energy. The governor gave Enbridge until Wednesday to shut down the pipeline, which it says it has no intention of doing. The two sides are currently in court-ordered mediation and are set to meet again on May 18th. I have Nathaniel Duke here with me. We're picking up this story again, but I think from a timely perspective, it was ordered to be shut down as of yesterday. It's not shut down as of yet. I think Governor Whitmer says that she's going to seize the profits if it continues, and now it's before the courts. So give us a little bit more on this.
And Enbridge has said they're not going to be shutting down the pipeline anytime soon. So we're going to see where this all transpires, and I'm sure there will be a lot that happens over the weekend and into the next week as well.
So you have the order from the governor, but in order for it to have effect, it has to be confirmed by a judge's order.
Right.
And so there's essentially an injunction before the court. Canada has weighed in on it. They're a friend of the court, or amicus curiae, and they've submitted a brief on this. Give us a bit of the understanding of what the arguments are of the federal government.
Well, federal government said, look, we've come together we've developed this response with a bunch of provinces, including Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and Quebec. And we're all coming together to the table. This is a Canadian issue. This is Canadian national security. A governor actually doesn't have the authority to stop this pipeline from operating under a 1977 treaty. And so basically the government of Canada is saying, look, let's put this before a federal judge in the US and let's get this dealt with.
So here's the interesting part. So, Canada is saying that she doesn't have the authority under the 1977 treaty, and we'll go into some of those specifics in a bit, but give us a bit of background on Governor Whitmer. When you're saying that she doesn't have the authority, is that really true? Let's take a look at some of the political issues in play here.
I mean, in terms of the constitutional framework of the United States, right?
I'm talking about the political, not the legal.
You're talking about the political. Well,
yeah, so give us a bit of our understanding of where she stands politically.
Well, I think where she stands politically is quite close to the ear of the president. I mean, he campaigned for her in her 2018 race for the governorship, and he called her up. They should. CNN
reports the Democratic National Vice Chair.
She is. Yeah. She's on the DNC.
Sorry. And then I think she was a considered candidate for vice president.
And this is where CNN says she arrived at a meeting with the then president-elect, right? And there was discussion at the time that he was considering vice presidential candidate.
So there's no surprise to our viewers that the XL pipeline was shut down as one of the first acts that President Biden did. So, you're seeing the tussle between foreign relations and domestic issues here. But let's wade in just a little bit deeper on what's going on with this treaty. So we have this treaty that's established to allow the U.S. essentially to be able to have transit of their energy needs from Alaska down to their states, et cetera. But it's a reciprocal treaty, so Canada gets the benefits from that as well. We're taking a look. I think that we've got, what is it? I think 21 pipelines that are going back and forth.
That's a lot of pipelines.
What is this going to do if we see...
Well, and this is what the federal government is saying in their briefing. They're saying, look, this is actually has a potential to really significantly impact Canadian-U.S. relations, because if we can't have if we can't negotiate with state government, if we can't negotiate in good faith with the U.S. government, if state governments are constantly causing international trade blockages, how can we have an advantageous relationship with the U.S.?
There's a significant amount of crude oil that's actually coming up from Texas into Canada.
Right.
What happens if there's a tit for tat that starts to happen?
Well, this is exactly it, and this is the concern. So.
Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens through the courts, and this story will continue, I'm sure. The shutdown of Pipeline 5 is seeing the clash of domestic politics with foreign relations. While relations between our two countries are unparalleled, as we've already seen with the Keystone XL pipeline, President Biden is not beyond allowing domestic politics to drive policies relating to Canada-U.S. relations. The matter is before the courts in Michigan, but a question is ever present of whether the court even has jurisdiction to address the treaty. The issue of our energy security is now ever present, and the response, either through the courts or through the U.S. government, will dictate whether a long-term shift in Canada's view on this subject will be needed. Stay with us as we'll be looking at a bill stalled in the Senate seeking to help jurors. Welcome back to Our Nation Today. A bill is languishing in the Senate, and advocates are trying to determine why it is not progressing. Bill S-212 would amend the criminal code to allow jurors to speak to a licensed healthcare professional if their mental health has been affected by a trial. Currently, when jurors are not in open court, any discussions they have cannot be subsequently disclosed for fear of criminal charge. The founder of the Canadian Juries Commission says he does not understand why the bill is not progressing. Mark Farrant says that he is worried the negative mental health effects of the pandemic could make jury duty even more distressing. Okay, so right off the bat, he's asking the question, why is this stalled in the Senate?
Right.
We're going to go there in a minute because I think that that's a whole other topic in and of itself. But let's just unpack what Bill S-212 is about.
Right.
What are they asking for?
Effectively, the main point of it is saying that jurors in difficult cases, being dealt with difficult evidence and stories that may forever harm their own psyche, they are just asking for the right of jurors to be able to have a discussion with mental health providers or healthcare professionals to disclose this information, which under the criminal code currently, they're not allowed to do so.
Okay, and so there's been prohibition since the beginning of time, not allowing jurors to be able to disclose what their findings are. I think
he mentions that numerous, mental health experts have turned jurors away for fear of violating some of this.
Yeah, of course,
right?
A criminal offense.
Right.
So, as a doctor, you can't say commit a criminal offense.
Right, no, exactly.
And so, and Mark Farrant was actually, I believe, a juror that was involved in the Tory Stafford homicide, which is just a brutal set of circumstances.
The facts, the whole case itself, very disturbing, and it gripped all of Canada for a while.
I think that a lot of times, the information that comes through in some of these trials and that are things that people would have never been exposed to before, and police officers might have that, but they're able to go and get treated otherwise. And so I think that there's just been this hole, that this is just a bill that makes sense. But now let's just talk about.
It's been a hole for 3 iterations now. It was on before. It was a private members bill.
You served in the military before. Could you have post-traumatic stress? You wouldn't be permitted to. Now it's understood. This needs to be dealt with, and now I think it's permeating through to say this is common sense.
Every party,
here.
every political leader in Canada, every mental health leader, they all say the same thing. Mental health is a serious concern for Canadians. This is a bill that would help address some very significant concerns.
So now let's just talk about why common sense bills are not able to get through the Senate. This was introduced by Conservative Michael Cooper. Senator Boisvenu has reintroduced this. It was prorogued in the last Parliament. So why would something so that has all party support not pass through?
Well, and this is where you have to go into the time allocation in both houses, both chambers of Parliament, right? So how to allocate time on debate to make sure it goes through the proper processes, that can change. You're talking about proroguing Parliament. But the Senate has no control over when the Prime Minister is going to prorogue Parliament.
It's my understanding that the Senate is having a difficult time getting their committees together in the first instance, and so that's
I don't think that this is an issue necessarily limited to only the Senate. I think that the House has very similar issues.
Okay.
So my main point.
I'm actually going to debate you on that because I actually think that the Senate is becoming more pronounced. I think that we saw a shift in the Senate as a result.
There was no doubt there was a shift, there's been no doubt that there's an increased amount of lobbying that's going on because no one is quite sure where the senators are going to line up.
That's right. And without them lining up, everybody's going in a variety of different directions, and there's good parts to that, and there's bad parts to that. But we're seeing probably one of the bad parts to it, where you have a bill that all parties support that isn't actually be able to get beyond the readings.
Right, and so it's up to the government's representative in the Senate in order to wrangle.
But Justice
wrangle
Levetti's parliamentary secretary says that this is a provincial issue, and the reality is not a provincial issue; it's a criminal code provision.
Obviously, the criminal code issue, but they're saying the jury's support in terms of increasing the financial benefit for
But you
jurors
can't have
every
support
day.
if it's a criminal action.
Well, and this is where
so if the government gets behind
federal
it,
leadership
then they
is
can push
needed,
it through
right?
the Senate, and
well,
I think we all
there
know
we go.
that.
If the government were behind it, we could get it through the Senate.
Okay. So for the most of the population, thankfully, their exposure to the brutality of committing heinous acts are captured in fiction, which at times can divorce one from the reality of what is occurring. But for police officers and others involved in the criminal justice system, this reality is ever present. While those involved in the criminal justice system have the ability to seek help for traumatic experiences, those performing their civic duty cannot. While Section 649 is laudable for ensuring the integrity of the jury system, it is lacking in ensuring the support for people that comprise the system. And the Senate and the government should take notice and move this bill forward. Stay with us. We'll be back after these messages talking about the Israel-Palestine conflict. Welcome back to Our Nation Today. Conflict is continuing between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. The latest surge in violence comes after weeks of escalating clashes between Palestinians and Israeli police in around Al-Haram and Al-Sharif, also known as the Temple Mount for Jews. The rising tensions revolved around restrictions imposed over Ramadan and evictions in the Palestinian areas. Far-right Israeli extremists were also reported to have made a strong showing. Hamas ordered Israel to withdraw police from the holy site and began firing rockets on Monday. Israel responded with airstrikes. The violence is ongoing and is of obvious concern to the international community. So we're seeing a repeat of what we saw in 2017, but having a tendency to actually go to where we saw in 2014 might be a full-fledged war if there's not intervention in this. Give us an understanding. How did this come about? What's the backdrop?
So, I mean, there was weeks of build up to this from what I was reading. You've got a lot of tension around police presence in
you've got a judicial ruling that's coming out on the settlements that was scheduled to come out that week, right?
Right. So not only do you have the police presence in a holy site for both Jews and Muslims, you have the settler issue, which is deeply controversial within Israel for all different groups, and then on Monday, which is also Jerusalem Day, which is a national holiday that celebrates the reunification of Jerusalem after the Six-Day War. You had Hamas say all police have to be withdrawn by this day from this area. The deadline was not met, and police were still there. They started firing rockets in.
Okay, so let's take a look at this clip, because we've got a clip that shows some of the rockets that are being fired, and we'll take a look at Israel's response. So the reality is this clip is just representative of one area in Israel, but all of Israel is getting bombarded.
Over 1,000 rockets fired so far,
rockets.
Right?
It's unbelievable, because when we're taking a look at it, we're actually seeing clips of Israel's Iron Dome kicking into place. And so you're seeing all these rockets lob. It looks like fireworks, and then all of a sudden you're seeing interception. So give us a bit of an understanding of the Iron Dome, because this is still relatively new.
Yeah, it's a fascinating technology. Basically, it works in a few different systems. It's not an actual dome of iron. It's a missile defense system. So a radar detects an incoming rocket or a projectile. It then sends that data to a central computer. The computer calculates where it's going to land. If it's going to land in a populated area, it then sends the data to the rocket, the anti-missile rockets, and boom, they explode
So
in the
basically, they can send information real time to be able to adjust the sky.
The rockets that are being sent out are smart rockets. They've got guidance, whereas the
about $1 million a pop, I think you were saying before.
Significant cost.
Yeah, significant cost.
So they're not cheap to shoot.
Okay, so I'm sure that this gives great solace in a lot of areas, because this is a massive buildup of missiles, and I think that we've got Iran that's always in the backdrop here.
Well, and this is where I mean, Hamas is a terrorist organization according to the government of Canada, and its armed wing is a terrorist organization according to other governments, right? Lots of governments saying Hamas is a terrorist group.
Sure.
This group has been getting weapons typically through overseas, I suppose, or through
I was
through
about to go
Iran,
on song with you,
through
so,
Iran,
yeah.
or through even underground tunnels through the Sinai.
And
Peninsula.
they've got about
now, those have all
6,000
been
rockets,
well,
right?
these are what we're estimating at, right? With the recent, or what the media is estimating. Anyway, long story point being here is that Hamas has actually developed its own capacity to build rockets now, which is something that they have, learned from Iranian development.
So what's
right?
the international community doing now? It's my understanding, Russia's wading in. And
Well, and
there's
here's
a
what's
call.
interesting: Turkey is calling for the
No,
international.
I heard what Turkey's
international
doing.
community, right? But this is what I'm saying is that this whole episode is now being used by different people. Iran, obviously, they have a lot to win, a lot to gain from Israel having a division with its Arab, neighbors.
Especially after the Abraham Accords,
exactly,
right?
and then growing progress on that front as well. Turkey,
I must admit, I think Turkey's it just seemed to be a lot of rhetoric that is normally thrown in on situations
So
like this.
Leadership is required.
Leadership is required. The continuation of the historic conflict between Israel and Palestine continues with little resolution in sight. While global leaders are beckoned to address how to de-escalate the hostilities, larger questions loom regarding what is needed to bring peace to the region. While Israel is well equipped to defend itself, the reality is that the rockets are raining down on its civilian population. The Palestinian people will be feeling the overwhelming military response, and the sad part is that innocent civilians will continue to be victim to violence on both sides. A voice of leadership is required to bring these hostilities to rest before this continues into a full-fledged war. Stay with us as we'll be looking at a report on a growing social media army in China. Welcome back to Our Nation Today. A 7-month-long investigation by Associated Press and the Oxford Internet Institute has found that the Chinese government's rise on Twitter has been driven by an army of fake accounts. These accounts have retweeted Chinese diplomats and state media thousands of times. They've often retweeted without disclosing that the content is government-sponsored. It comes as part of the Chinese Communist Party's war for influence on the internet, which President Xi Jinping has called the main battlefield. It also is an unfair battlefield, as social media like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter are blocked inside China. These are really serious findings here. When we're taking a look, I'm looking at the former UK ambassador for China, that he had posted 119,000 times, or he has 119,000 followers. But we're seeing from their diplomat.
They've been a huge problem. Like, this is a significant issue because it's actually about the entirety of what they're calling, the ambassador that you mentioned, he calls himself a wolf warrior. There are wolves, and there needs to be warriors to protect people from the wolves. So this is part of China's vision of how they want to be in the world.
But we're seeing that their diplomats are sending out tweets up to 778 times a day for a 9-month period, from 0.1% of all of accounts that are following or supporting this. Like, this is just manipulation at its core.
And they're often not disclosing, in many cases, that they're government sponsored anyway.
But but that is the issue. If they're saying it's government sponsored, then you can have that message. But in fact, what they're doing is they're masquerading as British subjects or otherwise, and putting this out as if there's wide-scale support for some of the messaging.
And this is where it becomes this is part of a very long-term and very advanced battle by the Chinese Communist Party to achieve its aims in the world.
And essentially, China, for the longest period, has said, "Here, listen, we don't want your media influence on our country, and we're going to block it off." But for the most part, they've left external influences to be as they are. Right. But now there's just a concerted effort to not only deal with issues like this, but we're actually starting to see the acquisition of journalism outlets and otherwise, whereby
it's about telling China's story well. which
or specifically in accordance with a certain narrative.
which would be well according to the government,
yeah,
right?
yeah, by
and so,
whatever
and that's
definition.
where I think we need to be very cautious about what we're reading online. and
So
all
what
of
are
this
some of the
stuff.
social media companies doing in this respect?
So, I mean, Facebook has started adding transparency labels, they call them, on politically or state-controlled media accounts.
Yes.
But that disclosure really is strongest in English language, not so strong in other languages. And there's a lot of state content that has a strong distribution in other languages, including, Arabic, Spanish, French, among others. So.
And so we're seeing specific influence in certain demographic or geographic areas, but we're also seeing that the uptake on the response from Twitter and otherwise is still relatively light in comparison. I think 14%.
They say they take them down when they find them, right?
Let's take a look here. And just on this one diplomat's Twitter account, they found that 43,000 times there were retweets.
Right.
And I say that 5 times fast.
Yeah, exactly.
And over 50% of them were already from accounts that have been disbanded because they've found that they violated Twitter's policies for influence and otherwise.
I would highly urge people to look at the AP story or the actual report from the Oxford Internet Institute, because there's some graphics there that I think really just show how individuals are having massive impacts on much more than what would be typical.
But I think that there's greater responsibility from social media companies to start to be able to police this, because this is going to change the narrative.
And individuals, we gotta be on our way.
The information that we digest affects and shapes our outlook, for good and for bad. And as such, it is essential to ensure that we can rely on the integrity of the sources of information. Albert Einstein stated that anyone who doesn't take truth seriously in small matters can't be trusted in large ones either. This is not only an issue for the People's Republic of China to reconcile. Twitter, Facebook, and social media companies need to ensure that the shaping of public narrative is based on the values of transparency, authenticity, and the free exchange of ideas. Both Nathaniel and I would like to thank you for watching Our Nation Today. And remember, keep examining and know that you are part of the solution.